President Trump's trade tariffs mean Gary Cohn has finally had enough. Republicans are furious, and foreign leaders are ready to retaliate. Plus, he's being sued by a former porn star. And with special counsel Robert Mueller turning up the heat, Trump insiders are starting to sweat. And it's only Thursday. I'm Molly Roberts, joined by Post Opinion's newest columnist, Megan McArdle, as well as veteran columnists Ruth Marcus and Charles Lane.
The old shoes.
Our producers have challenged us to make tariffs interesting, so let's rely on our viewers instead to do that and start with the caption contest. Ruth tweeted out this screen grab of Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross on CNBC last week. He used a can of Campbell's soup and other convenience store treats to argue that President Trump's proposed steel and aluminum tariffs are no big deal. We'll weigh in on his argument later, but first, the photo. And we're going to pull up some of the top captions from our followers, and then we will vote on them. The winner gets an It's Only Thursday mug, which is extremely exciting because even we are not allowed to take these off set. So we hope everybody will take a look and contribute in the future.
Who's going to stop us?
I don't know. I'm very obedient. I mean, you're the veteran, so you can do what you want, but I'm still walking on thin ice.
Yeah, we old people are outlaws.
All right, here we go. Let's get the photo. Let's get some captions. All right. Caption contest now open. First caption. Yes, we can.
Ah, that's good.
Can. All right.
Yeah.
Second one. You and I only get one can, and the president gets 2 cans. Okay. Mm-hmm. Third one. Chicken soup for the soulless. And finally, chicken soup for the sold. All right. So I guess we should just all just say our favorites here? And
Those are our only 4 choices?
Yeah, those are our only 4 choices.
Yeah.
Those, I think that was the cream of the crop, but...
Is that like a soup pun?
Well, I was hoping people would pick up on it, otherwise I was just going to let it sit.
Yeah.
This is starting to mushroom.
All right, so I guess we can...
I want to make a bisque joke.
All right,
Yeah.
so we've got... Who votes for Yes We Can? Why don't everyone can vote for 2? How's that?
I'm
voting for Yes We Can.
Who votes for Yes We Can? All right, 2 votes for that. All right. Who votes for You and I only get 1 can and the president gets 2 cans?
Oh, I'll vote for that.
It's a
very
2
kind of
can
you.
con, get it?
I don't think it is because that just
No.
has nothing to do with soup. Chicken soup for the soulless?
Oh, come on. That's
I like
the
that
winner.
better than chicken soup
Yeah.
for the soul.
Okay, so that's 2. And chicken soup for the sold. 1. Okay. All right, so we have a tie between Yes We Can and chicken soup for the soulless, so we're going to do a tiebreaker. I clearly don't understand how voting and math works, so this is what we're doing. Between Yes We Can and
It's
chicken
instant
soup
runoff
for the
voting.
soulless, who votes for Yes We Can? All right, that's 2. And chicken soup for the sold. I forgot I didn't vote.
Soulless.
She's the
soulless.
She's the
Oh my
speaker
God,
of the
I
House.
hate-
She doesn't get a vote.
I hate democracy.
This is
This
no
is like
ties,
a
so
Lonnie
you don't need me
Guinier
to break
voting
it.
system here with all kinds
It's
of...
instant
That is
runoff
good.
voting. Everyone
So
wants
obscure.
it. We at the Washington
There's-
Post are leading the way.
There's at least one viewer out there who
So-
got that reference.
Yeah, and if you know, that's our next week's contest. Identify Lonnie Guinier. And age yourself.
I can't do it, so.
Seriously?
She
Lonnie
even taught at your
Guinier
college.
was the Yale Law School professor who was President Bill Clinton's first choice to head the Civil Rights Division, but never made it to a vote because she was too controversial for views about voting, which I now can't summon up.
And what year was that?
1992, 93.
If it was 93, I might have been born. Otherwise, you really can't blame me.
Can somebody get a new moderator?
Yeah, let's
here?
get off this
These
age
infants
theme.
just
Let's
don't
get off the
pay
age theme.
nearly enough attention to
Okay, Yes
national
We
affairs.
Can wins. Can we pull up who that was? They're getting a mug. I guess we're going to get in touch with them. All right, we will get in touch with
Yeah,
them.
Gene Bolduc.
Yes, Jean Bolduc. So
Congratulations, Jean.
It wasn't the best, but okay.
Ooh.
I was on the soul list.
Jean, I think you're great, and I think you absolutely deserve the mug, so we will figure out how to get that to you, and we will have it in more contests, we hope, coming up.
She can
So-
sip her chicken soup from the mug.
Very classy. So we hope that you'll participate, all of you viewers, and also that you'll participate during the show by sending in your comments and questions and whatever else. We'll try to bring them on. So, jokes aside, if Trump moves ahead with his protectionist trade policies, the United States will set tariffs of 25% for steel and 10% for aluminum. Earlier today, the president framed the tariffs as a national security issue.
Our greatest presidents, from Washington to Jackson to Lincoln to McKinley and others, They protected our country from outside influence, from other countries coming in and stealing our wealth and stealing our jobs and stealing our companies. And we're going to be very fair, we're going to be very flexible, but we're going to protect the American worker, as I said I would do in my campaign.
Okay, so I feel like I've got a panel of tariff experts here, and I'm kind of a rube on the topic. So, Chuck, do you want to tell us, will this protect the American worker?
Well, it will protect the American workers who make steel and aluminum. And by the way, not just any old steel, but in particular the kind that's made in blast furnaces. And it will protect those who make primary aluminum, which is different from various processed products. But it won't protect the workers who, for example, build cars, or in the case of the Ford F-150, the new aluminum body pickup truck. So those people will perhaps lose jobs. We'll just have to see. But that's the way all tariffs work, which is that they essentially allocate resources by government fiat, and some people win and some people lose. It's very interesting the allusion he made to these past presidents, all of them from, well, McKinley overlapped the 19th and 20th centuries, but all from the 19th century, which was a time when there were high tariffs quite often in the United States, but it was not only done for protection. It was also done because it was the primary source of revenue for the federal government. And we don't really have that justification anymore. And by the way, he couldn't think of a whole lot of presidents in the 20th century because basically most of that time we gave up on this kind of crude tariff because we had such a bad experience with it in 1930 with the Smoot-Hawley tariff that helped us into a depression. So, you know, he's presenting his usual one-sided view of history. And we'll just have to wait until this afternoon when the details come out.
And it's worth noting that Smoot-Hawley, weirdly, even the Republicans who passed them weren't actually trying to pass tariffs that high. It was this weird institutional breakdown where no one actually wanted the outcome they got. But they're just, once they started, it sort of triggered a lobbying frenzy. But in fact, it's been a long time since anyone really thought that tariffs were a great way to promote economic growth and make your economy healthy. There are sort of some examples of infant industry protections that have worked, but the number of examples that have worked are so far outnumbered by the number that haven't, that it's kind of like saying, well, some people have won the Powerball, I am putting my retirement savings in Powerball tickets.
You are? How's it going?
So, it hasn't worked yet, but I'm hopeful.
But you have a very specific answer to the question that Molly posed, which is this going to help American workers?
No. I mean, you know, like, again, Chuck's right. It's winners and losers, but the losers outnumber the winners. The number of jobs that involve making, you know, doing construction and making cars and doing canning stuff and all of these jobs, making machine tools, which is a major, like heavy machinery is actually a major U.S. export. We export a lot of airframes, right? All of these things are actually very highly affected by the cost of metal. And those are, you know, this is not, well, you know, people like us get to have our fancy iPhones and steel workers in Pennsylvania get hosed. This is like those good American manufacturing jobs that everyone's been talking about. In fact, we're going to lose more of those than we're going to gain. I mean, I should say, you know, that that's what the first study out on this says. It's obviously still a work in progress, but there's not a lot of great examples of protecting input goods like steel and aluminum and getting a good economic outcome. The real question is, politically, will American workers appreciate that? Because there's a kind of like 4 steps between the steel tariffs and what will happen to their jobs, especially in things like construction. And do those workers know? Do they vote on that? The steel workers, on the other hand, absolutely vote on it, right? This is something where steel workers and steel mill owners love this. And so politically, you can get, it's possible that this is going to be politically smart, even though it's economically bad. And that's one of the really frustrating things about trade policy generally, is that it's quite hard to explain. And the kind of intuitive sense that, oh, steel tariffs, we're going to save good jobs, isn't correct, but it is kind of intuitively appealing.
Well, you put your finger on the sort of political dynamic of this, which is the people who are in a position to win know who they are very specifically. The people who are in a position to lose are kind of left wondering exactly how the process worked out to their detriment. That's true of any protection we have. Probably the last remaining tariff program of major significance we have is on sugar.
Right.
And certainly that gets factored in the price of everyone's candy, but no one can really put their finger on it, and so it survives politically.
And the beneficiaries are like literally, it's like 6 families control
Yes.
basically almost all of the sugar made in the United States. And then of course there's also Iowa farmers who like it because it drives up the price of corn syrup. But in general, right, it's this tiny, tiny, tiny beneficiaries, but no one else in America knows.
But
that
if you
they're-
don't have sugar, you don't have a country.
Yes, that's right.
One final point on that, just very quickly. There's a really specific political issue, which is the special election in Western Pennsylvania on next Tuesday, where the Republicans and an upstart Democrat are really head-to-head. It's a toss-up election, and it wouldn't surprise me if the timing of this tariff
Right.
Really?
was, yes, well,
Yeah.
this is the expert analysis those people are paying for out there. And the prices, I'd say they're getting what they paid for.
We're going to put a tariff on you.
Right. Anyway, that was my genius
So
point.
speaking of expert analysis, Megan did a call out on Twitter for comments and questions about trade for the show, and this is what she got. Rob Yarbrough says, I have a question. Why doesn't anyone factor in the monetary value of making libertarians unhappy when discussing tariffs? Priceless. So we'll humor you this time, Rob. Anybody want to place a value on that?
You know, I think this is actually a hard question. I mean, I absolutely think in trade analysis, you should look at secondary and tertiary benefits, right? You can't just look at the industry. It's like with the steel tariffs. We can't just look at the steel workers. We need to look at the other industries. But I think, you know, I was fascinated by this. And so I asked my Twitter followers, how much would they be willing to pay to make a libertarian unhappy? And I have to tell you, the answers were not high.
Really? I'd pay
which
a lot.
I'd be at least
Okay,
a
how
can of
much?
Campbell's soup.
How much would you be personally willing to pay?
25% of, whatever.
everything you consume.
No, I mean, it's funny though, because I think libertarians should be happy, because this actually gives them a chance to make their point. They're getting a real world demonstration of how nutty state intervention is. I'd say that they should be paying us.
There's a kind of heighten the contradictions argument that worries me a little
So
there.
libertarians are not the only ones who are unhappy here. China's been a big target for Trump, but leaders of lots of other countries are riled up too, including Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who called the tariffs absolutely unacceptable. He's not alone.
We hope to tell the U.S. that imports from Japan, which is an allied nation, pose absolutely no threat to its national security.
If the announcements made last week are confirmed and implemented, it is clear that they would be in violation of WTO rules. In that case, the EU would have the right to either take action using their dispute settlement body or to take countermeasures.
Okay, so we should note that the White House says, and we'll find out exactly what's happening today, that Mexico and Canada could be spared, or at least that there'll be a 30-minute waiting period for
30
them.
day.
30-minute. Yeah. Everything moves so
is
fast
speeded
in the
up in
digital
the
age.
news cycle.
I just can't wrap my head around 30 whole days. No, 30-day waiting period. Thank you, Chuck, for them to renegotiate NAFTA and please Trump there. But the European Union is considering imposing tariffs on bourbon, peanut butter, cranberries, orange juice. It all sounds very American. It's going to be like apple pie and Bruce Springsteen albums next. But so I guess the question here is, what happens? Trump says we'll have a trade war and we can win a trade war. Can we win a trade war? What is this going to do?
Trade wars are good and easy to win.
Yes, that is what he says.
A couple points on that. I think the president's belief, as Mark Fisher of our paper wrote just the other day, people often think he doesn't have any core beliefs, but this is one of them, protectionism, and a particularly kind of, I would say, crude, blunt version of protectionism, something he's been espousing his whole adult life. And so I don't think, a higher EU tariff on peanuts is going to shake that. To the contrary, as he has said also, I think he said, I like conflict, and he may feel that something that will strengthen him politically would be a situation in which he can pose as the defender of the American worker against these meddling other countries. But I think the reason that people like Trudeau and Macron are saying the specific things they are is the specific rationale that was offered to legalize these tariffs, which would otherwise not have been permissible. Namely, they're vital to our national security, which is a debatable proposition, but What that allows the president to do is sort of slip through a lot of what would otherwise be the U.S.'s obligations on international law. And mind you, if he gets away with that, if the United States gets away with that, other countries will start trying it too.
Right.
And that's where the real potential for trade war comes in, not so much in the tit-for-tat tariffs, but in the idea that that exception to free trade rules will then just sort of, as lawyers like to say, that exception will swallow the rules, and then we won't have international
Right.
trade
And that's
regime
a
anymore.
huge threat, right? I mean, the World Trade Organization was established partly because we'd seen this happen after Smoot-Hawley. The whole world
Right.
was kind of at each other's throats on trade, and then World War II happens. We say we're going to have peace by bringing us all together on trade, so it's kind of terrifying to think that could all be torn down.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of restrictions right after World War II, especially on currency, but also just on a bunch of goods and so forth. And we still have what I think are actually legitimate security restrictions, right? I mean, there's technology that we shouldn't export because it's militarily significant, and if there was a war, we really wouldn't like our competitors to have it, our enemies to have it. And there's stuff, I have to say, I have been given pause about, say, buying a Huawei cell phone, because the Chinese government does seem to have used those phones to spy on people. So there are legitimate kind of security issues, but this is not really one of them, right? The U.S. is it seems really unlikely that we are going to find ourselves in a war with Canada, where their fearsome ice guns make it hard for us to compete unless we have our own steel mills making all of our steel.
Well, it goes beyond that, Megan. Excuse me. There is an actual Defense Department document, a national defense document, that declares Canada part of the U.S. industrial base, because our economies are so integrated, and Canadian aluminum is such a huge, and they're so close. Canada isn't like our friend. Canada isn't even our neighbor. Canada and the United States, even before NAFTA, were very closely knit together in every. So for Trump to sort of redraw that boundary is quite extraordinary. And just a final point on that, I do think in all of this discussion, when we're talking about the rules and so on, we do have to talk about China's behavior, because apart from the EU, Japan, Mexico, Canada, China itself has been flouting, if not the letter, the spirit of the free trade rules, and to some extent has, provoked, alas, this terrible overreaction. But these measures, by the way, are not very well calculated to get China to change. In fact, I think they enable China to sit back and laugh while the whole West has a fight amongst itself. But something at some point has to give in terms of the Chinese protectionism and Chinese mercantilism.
Well, and also the fact that they wildly overbuilt their steel capacity, and now they're just letting it flood markets and sort of mess everyone up, and they want everyone else to close their capacity, even though China is not actually a particularly productive, they have to import most of their coal and ore. They're not actually a particularly productive maker of steel. But because when they were growing at 10%, they built up all this capacity, and now does need to be a global solution to the problem of Chinese overcapacity in steel. Aluminum's a slightly different case, because aluminum is basically like you make that cheaply because you have cheap electricity, and that's just like Canada has a lot of hydropower. It's always going to beat us on aluminum. But you need to do a multilateral solution for that. You can't just slap your tariffs. We already have tariffs. Most people don't realize we already have higher tariffs than this on Chinese steel. All it does is push the problem somewhere else.
I have never seen two people get so exercised about tariffs.
Tariffs
but
are
again, I'm
very
young.
exciting.
I have to cut you off, although
Sorry.
I do think you've managed to make tariffs interesting, as we were attempting to
We're
do.
going to have a spin-off show. It's called The Tariff
Tariffs
Hour.
all the time.
Or we can have a
Tariff talk.
spin-off show about White House economic advisor Gary Cohn, who has become a big character recently. This apparently was the last straw for him. White supremacy did not do the trick this summer. He announced his departure this week. The breakup comes just months after a very public display of affection between Cohn and President Trump.
They said, will Gary Cohn continue or remain in the administration? I said, I hope so. Now, if he leaves, I'm going to say, I'm very happy that he left, okay? All right? Come here, Gary. Are you happy, Gary? You just missed a very big bill. I think he's pretty happy.
Yes, I'm happy. How's that?
Gary, hopefully we'll be staying for a long time.
Okay, Gary Cohn is no longer very happy, and now he is gone. So what does this mean for the White House? Are we saying, okay, populism is driving away these otherwise reasonable globalist people? Are we worried, or do we not care that Gary Cohn is gone? I know that you had an opinion on this, Megan.
Take
Yeah,
it away, Megan.
I'm not. I've never been a super huge fan of Gary Cohn, but you know, he was an advocate for free trade in the White House, which I mean, you can give the Trump administration some credit for the fact that it has probably the broadest number of representation of economic policy ideas in recent history, right? You had Gary Cohn pushing for free trade, and then you have Peter Navarro, who's like basically one step away from autarky. And you know, so, but the problem is we're now losing the wing from the free trade, and as a free trader, right, that's going to disturb me. In general, I think that, for one thing, the speed with which these tariffs were introduced and the kind of lack of forethought, right? It doesn't seem like this was the result of a very long, careful policy process, let us say. And that, you know, I don't know how much real restraint Cohn could enact on those things, because he basically like announced it on Twitter, and it's not even really clear how much his advisors knew before he did it. But nonetheless, it was that moderating influence, and that's gone. And I think the big concern for me is that it's going to be hard to replace him, right? You know, even after, in November of 2016, I was talking to the people who would normally be going to staff in a Republican administration, and most of the people I talked to were like, sorry, not this time. The people who did go in, many of whom are good people who are doing their best for the country.
Some of them are good people.
At the lower levels.
That was a little Trump joke.
That was
Well,
a little
yes.
immigration
Yeah.
joke.
But at the lower levels, right, a lot of them are
Oh, no.
people who genuinely felt, you know what, this may be bad for my career, it's probably not going to be a lot of fun, but I feel like I have an obligation to make sure there are some people who know about policy in the administration. But a lot of people just said, look, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But that was before the last 18 months, right? Now what we've seen is this wave of departures, the lack of loyalty up and down in this administration, the total chaos, the White House leaking like a sieve, the vicious infighting, and the fact that there was just a report that staffers who try to leave do not find the lucrative job opportunities in the private sector so easy to come by as is conventional for a presidential administration staffer. With all of those things together, who is going to want to come in? Are they going to be worse than Gary Cohn? I think that is possible, even likely.
So if we can talk about the White House leaking like a sieve and move on to the scandal I think everyone is craving. Reports suggest chaos in the White House, from policy to the Russia probe, is making it harder for aides to stand by the president. Among the big stories this week, Special Counsel Robert Mueller has gathered evidence that just before Trump's inauguration, Eric Prince, founder of the private security company Blackwater, held a secret meeting in Seychelles with a Russian official close to Vladimir Putin. That January 2017 meeting reportedly was an effort to establish a back channel between the incoming Trump administration and the Kremlin. Plus, there's a growing list of financial scandals facing our favorite, the president's son-in-law and advisor, Jared Kushner. So let's start with Jared. Ruth, I'm wondering if you can kind of just lay out for us what is going on here. Jared's getting fire from all sides. What's he being accused of?
Well, I think I want to go to the Seychelles because it's so fascinating. We don't know what happened at that meeting.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that it stinks to high heaven. And what we do know is that the initial explanation of that meeting, oh, I just happened to be in the UAE, and as I happened to be in the UAE, they were making a kind of play date for me with a Russian who also just happened to be in the UAE, and quelle surprise. This is ridiculous, and the ridiculousness may be evident on its face, but what's not evident on its face is the ability of Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his team of seasoned prosecutors to get these people under oath,
Right.
and get their documents and their emails and drill down on precisely what happened here. And so I think that may be sort of the biggest emerging story of the week, is that we had, after the election, a number of efforts to create contacts and nurture contacts with the Russians, a country with whom I don't think we have had the warmest relations according to typical Republican doctrine. And with whom you could communicate in perfectly ordinary above board ways if you so chose. So what the heck was going on here?
So what could have
yes.
been going on, I guess, is what I want to know. There are obviously a few options, and like you said, it's not very believable that this was kind of above board. Oh, how's our foreign policy going to go with you guys when we're in?
Well, what we found in each one of these episodes, first the information and evidence of the weird meeting and weird encounter emerges. Then you have those just completely not believable on its face explanation of what's happening in this meeting. And then that perfectly predictably starts to fall apart.
Right.
So there's any number of these that we've had, including the Trump Tower adoption meeting, which brings us to Jared. Jared lost his security clearance, but he's still working on Mideast peace, and he's still working on fixing the government, and so I, wish him well in that endeavor.
He's fixing Mexico too,
and now
because
he's off to Mexico.
yes, because
meeting without the ambassador, U.S. ambassador in Mexico present.
who just quit.
Did she?
Yes,
Ah.
announced that she was quitting. I mean,
As a result of this?
no, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
She
All right.
said she wanted to spend more time with her family or something like that, but it's being taken as a sign like she just can't deal with the White House.
She wanted to spend more time with her family complaining about Donald Trump.
Don't we all?
There aren't too many jobs I can think of right now more thankless than attempting to be the ambassador of this administration to Mexico. But no, Jared, after this terrible situation where the president of Mexico refused to talk to President Trump anymore because of the business of the wall, they sent Jared down to Mexico to do the conversation instead. And we'll see what happens with that. I mean, this everything relates to tariffs, as you know. I mean, this
More tariffs?
No.
this I would assume.
No. I am channeling Joanne Armayo.
Producers are going to get in my ear and be
No,
like, stop
Whenever
it,
I
stop
try
it,
to
stop
talk
it.
about taxes, Joanne Armayo goes like this.
Jared is connected to tariffs because he's down there trying to resurrect the NAFTA discussion in spite of the fact that the president has inflamed them both on the wall and on the tariff.
Okay, so we're going to move on. Cut the tariff conversation short again. I'm so sorry. Only in a soap opera like The Trump Show would we get an episode where a former porn star is suing the president. Stormy Daniels is trying to nullify a deal she made, accepting $130,000 in exchange for her silence about an alleged affair with Trump before he was president. Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, says that deal is null because Trump did not sign it. And he has suggested Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, has tried to intimidate his client, but he says Stormy Daniels will not be cowed.
In light of the amount of misinformation that's out there, some of which has been disseminated by Mr. Cohen and others, she believes it's important that the public learn the truth about what happened.
Okay, so first question here that I think a lot of people have been asking is,
How does this relate to tariffs?
That's true, with comments streaming and more tariffs,
Sorry,
please.
Molly, go ahead.
Can you sue the president?
Okay, so, well, let me say this about that. If the president can sue you, as the president did in his secret arbitration court, getting his secret one-sided arbitration order with, I guess the arbitration police are going to enforce it against Stormy Daniels. If he can sue you, then yes, you can sue him. How do we know this? We know this actually because among other people, the husband, this is just like the great small world story of Washington, the husband of one Kellyanne Conway, George Conway, was part of the lawsuit that represented Paula Jones in suing, don't tell me again how old I am, in suing Bill Clinton.
Oh, no, I've heard about this one.
For conduct,
heard about Bill Clinton?
that he engaged in before he was president. So I think right now when the president is perfectly willing to use the courts to enforce this ridiculous and unenforceable and completely repugnant non-disclosure hush money agreement, she can go sue him.
I'm trying to understand what she's claiming though, because did she get the money or not? If she got the money,
Yeah.
She's
then-
seeking a kind of declaratory judgment. She might not have phrased it that way, that this order is null and void and that she is able to, I mean, the thing that's so interesting is I'm trying to follow the presidential and presidential lawyer logic here and Sarah Huckabee Sanders' logic here, though I know that's an oxymoron. And that is this. The president has already decreed and declared and assured us that he did not have this affair. He paid $130,000, or he or somebody,
Yeah.
we
His
don't know
lawyer had a
who.
question.
He had to,
Through
his
his-
lawyer, just for the goodness of his heart, decided
through his
to.
lawyer to make sure that this person did not assert something that we all already know to be untrue. And as she wants to continue, and now that we know from the president's own lawyer that he facilitated this $130,000 payment, which we still don't know who it's from, we need to go to court to shut her up about the non-existent, I deny it completely, totally, and everybody should believe me affair. Come on.
So, like you said, we don't know who paid it. So, why are we talking about this? Is that the issue, who paid it and what that
Yes.
means?
Yes.
Well,
The-
a bunch of different reasons.
No, I think, let's be real here. Unfortunately, you mentioned a past president who had dalliances that weren't so illicit.
And he wasn't the only one.
Yes, many presidents and people like that, John Edwards comes to mind, have had affairs, some with not super necessarily the kind of people you take home to meet your mother, and some of them have even paid. John Edwards notoriously paid.
It was paid.
It was passive voice. A
Yeah.
person paid for him,
Yeah.
which is exactly my point, which is when you really get to what's potentially disgusting and scandalous here, it would be if somebody else paid off Stormy Daniels on behalf of Donald Trump. And, this is not a guy who readily parts with his own cash, even if he is a billionaire. And it wouldn't surprise me at all. And I don't think we have come to rest in terms of this. I mean, it's a very fishy set of, elocutions that his lawyer has been using about how he facilitated a payment or whatever. To me, the question is, who, if anyone other than himself, would Donald Trump be beholden to for this payment?
Well,
So,
and
Ruth,
what
you say
other,
there are a
what-
lot of reasons.
Well, and what? Well, I mean, I might point out that you might be concerned about it if you cared about having somebody in the White House of high moral character who wouldn't cheat on his wife, who wouldn't cheat on his wife with a porn star, who wouldn't cheat on his wife with a porn star. I think it was 4 months after she gave birth to his son. But just leaving that aside for a second, you're totally right. Follow the money is a good thing. What other areas of potential blackmail are there for this president? We don't know. We know that he has when you go to work for the Trump organization, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and he will. If you go to work as one of Trump's wives, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And if you have a dalliance with him and threaten to talk about it, you get paid off. There's a lot of. He seems to be very frantic not to let us know what it is he's doing.
Well, I would actually ask what it says about Trump's judgment that, they're actually talking about suing on this, right? If you think about this, there's no benefit to doing this. All you're doing is publicizing it. It's what's known as the Streisand effect, right? Barbara Streisand discovered there were public photos of her mansion and tried to shut them down, thereby alerting people to the fact that these photos existed. Previously, they'd had 6 views, and now they had millions of views. Right. And it's the same thing, right? If he was actually serious, he would sue her for defamation, right? If you actually want to claim that this didn't happen, you don't sue her for violating an NDA, which doesn't exist. You sue her for defamation.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, no, right, obviously. But if you do not have this option, because that would be a very stupid thing to do, then you just shut up. And
you'll
ignore
notice
it. And it's a 2-day story instead of this endless thing.
There were a lot of other lawsuits the president threatened to file. They didn't file. But then I just want to bring up one more arena in which this could be a problem for the president. This would assume an effective Federal Election Commission. But when money is paid, I think it was a week before, finally, when they anteed up, it was a week before the election. When money is paid in a way that could help you in your candidate capacity, that money needs to come from a legitimate source. It needs to be, the amount needs to be reported if it's to your campaign. There are limits on how much you can contribute to a campaign.
Right.
So there's all sorts of, it was ridiculous when the Justice Department went after John Edwards as a matter of criminal law violations on this. So I do not argue that this is a criminal law violation, but it is a election law issue that is, I think, potentially significant and needs to also be addressed here.
And we want someone of high moral character in the White House. I'm not sure you realize we are living in a post-morality world. We are out of time, but we're not out of opinions, and we're definitely not out of opinions on tariffs. So watch for us at WashingtonPost.com/opinions and on Twitter. And a look on the dark side, It's only Thursday.